Bharti, for the opportunity. I think we have an amazing set of panelists today. These are very accomplished people. They know entrepreneurship. They understand what it means to build a business. They understand how to nurture entrepreneurs. Some of them have played that role. So let me start by first bringing in Mr. Anil Ahuja and asking him, post-pandemic, are there new rules of entrepreneurship? And what is the change in the environment that we need to be sensitive as entrepreneurs? Mr. Ahuja.
I think this pandemic has come as an event in an aggregate set of circumstances. So if this pandemic had come, say 20 years ago, without internet, without connectivity, without delivery mechanisms, without warehousing, without all kinds of other things, we would have had a very different problem. So the pandemic has come and, in a sense, only accelerated a trend that we were already on. And I don't think there are, specific changes that we need to make on account of the pandemic. I just think we need to recognize that certain behavioral changes that have happened, those which would have happened over a 5-year period, have been compressed into 1 year, which was 2020. I mean, the way we are all engaging today, the way we are interacting. So that's on the side of the market. But on the other side, I think equally important, what I see in India is, I see the young India being extremely welcoming of risk, welcoming of change, welcoming of entrepreneurship, which is not the situation when some of us were growing up. When we were growing up, it was important to find a job. It was important to have a steady income and all kinds of other stuff. So I think the risk-taking ability, and that is supported. Again, it's not just that element alone. It is supported by an environment. It's supported by an environment of mentors. It's supported by an environment of private equity, venture capital, the government itself, which is playing an extremely important role in encouraging the entrepreneurship and startups. So I think all these things are a culmination and an acceleration of a trend that was already underway. I would not give the pandemic too much credit for what is happening.
Okay, and we're discussing the growth in the digital economy, the growth in digital opportunity. On that, clearly the pandemic has been the chief digital transformation officer. The habits that have become very digital.
Yes.
I mean, in old times, we would either do this in Singapore or get you into India and do it. But we are doing it, you're in Singapore, we're doing it. So whether it's in the food delivery space, whether it's in edutech space, whether it's in any services-oriented space, technology has accelerated the option of digital and virtual. In that sense, what is the change rules, or what are the trends, if I may say, Mr. Ahuja?
So I think there are a couple of sectors which are obviously going to get impacted way more. And the trend of disintermediation is very, very strong. So the end user and the producer, now we can discuss what we are producing and what we are consuming, but the end user and the producer are going to get closer and closer to each other, with the entire intermediary chain being disintermediated. So I think that is a very significant trend, and that could happen whether it's a payment system, whether it's an education system, whether it's entertainment, whether it's gaming, whether it's consumption, food, etc. So I think if we look at the broad principle is the whole world just got connected. I mean, it was already on its way of getting connected, but we are just connected. So if I'm producing something that is of value to you, you and I should be able to engage with very little friction in between. And what that product is, or what those, what is the delivery mechanism, all that can be worked out. But the core concept of being able to connect the buyer and the supplier, the end supplier, seamlessly, immediately, I think that is the single most powerful change that is taking place.
Beautiful. Clearly, you're right that that relationship in some way got strengthened, and digital has added to strengthening that relationship and creating habits that may create new consumer trends and amplify certain sectors to a level, the acceleration. Mr. Ahuja, just to give you a data point, if you look at e-commerce, in the last 20 years, US, which is the most established and evolved e-commerce market, out of the total organized retail, 16% of it was e-commerce. But in the 11 months post-pandemic, that 16 has become 26% plus. So 16% in 20 years and 10% in 11 months. So that is the kind of acceleration. And I can take sectors that you take EduTech, just to again give you a data point. In the last 15 months, $1.4 billion has been invested in EduTech already. Almost another billion pledged or on its way to being invested in Indian EduTech startups. So I just wanted to give you these two data points. Let me bring in Rohit Bayana. Rohit, again, you put in about $350 million over the last 11 plus years that your fund has been around. Tell us, in the last 10 months, what sectors have become even more important? And is there a new code to succeed in this digital economy? Because we're talking about digital opportunities growth.
Yeah, thanks, Anurag. Thanks for getting us all together. So, Anurag, very similar to what Anil was saying, I'll just call it fragmented value chains. Wherever there are fragmented value chains, historically, companies, the dominant players in those fragmented value chains have kind of sat on their commoditized leadership position and enjoyed that. Whether it is, and again, taking the same thing Anil was using, same thread, there's a consumer and there's a provider. On either side, whichever way you look at, the people who were holding those dominant positions were really enjoying the fact that it was fragmented. I think post-COVID, given how acceleration has happened in digital, what we are observing is, per force, every player has to extrapolate or expose the digital base they're sitting on, which basically means anyone can step in and quickly start stitching that fragmented value chain. Now, you might start stitching, but it'll take you a time to create your brand, and consumers will still take longer to get to you. But theoretically, in any sector, it could be food, it could be pharma, it could be rural. Rural is a massive opportunity. I think rural India is going to start seeing the real benefit of digital consumption now start coming in, and there are companies already creating inroads on how to do the last mile fulfillment. So we're talking about, Anurag, the numbers you gave, 16 to 26 in the US. Think about it, 16 to 26 happening in an economy where pretty much penetration was significant. Now you're talking about an economy where penetration isn't significant at all. So if the 16 and 26 parallel is drawn, the proportionate jump that we would expect to see is much, much more. So that's I think what people like us are really looking forward to. And I was taking some real examples, pharma, food, rural. Since you asked that question, those three areas, particularly from a supply chain standpoint, are areas where we are looking forward to a lot of innovation.
Okay, Rohit. Thank you for giving us those specific examples. Now, let me go to Mr. Garg. Mr. Garg, again, you've been an entrepreneur, you built a business, you sold it, you now interview entrepreneurs, you invest in startups. So give us a sense of what are the opportunities in this new digital economy that is accelerating at a pace that is exciting and also unnerving.
Thank you, Anurag. Delighted to be here. So, I would say that the pandemic is what I would call a black swan event that has taken place in the world. Not necessarily from a negative perspective, but look at the incredible opportunities that have opened up. Rohit just spoke about rural. Look at what direct benefit transfer has done to millions and millions of people in our country. No middlemen, therefore no shrinkage. Look at what is happening in digital currency. China has launched its own digital currency. Look at what blockchain is doing to real estate and to all the documentations that are happening in our country. I mean, real estate is suddenly now becoming completely transparent with blockchain. Look at what's happening on work from home, something that I believe is going to outlive COVID. From webinars to entertainment, from shopping to yoga, from music lessons to financial transactions to medical consultation, everything is now a reality. Look at what's happening in courts. I was speaking to some senior judges and some senior lawyers. They're saying they've become much, much more productive without wasting time sitting inside courts and, getting, as they call in Hindi, tariq pe tariq. Look at what's happening on tax filings, government returns. And on the other side, look at, from the other perspective, Digital India has brought families closer together. Everyone is now using some video platform, talking to families. My children are all over the world. My family is all over the world. We speak once a week, which never used to happen when we could go out and fly out to Singapore or wherever to meet them. Weddings are going online, prayer meetings are going online. So I think it's a complete game changer for us. And I'm really positive. I mean, I don't like COVID. I don't like what it has done to the health of the world. But I think the effects and positive effects of COVID are that it has brought all of us together and on a very, very different platform. And given the way India has always functioned, we have leapfrogged a generation as far as digital technology is concerned. We did it when the mobile phones came in, when we jumped straight to GSM rather than go through multiple phases. And we are going to do it again in the digital world because of COVID.
Thank you so much again for giving us specific examples. And what I loved is that you're saying COVID may have started it, it may have accelerated this growth in the digital economy, and everything has to be digital, everything has to be tech. But you're saying it may outlive COVID. It may become a way of doing business. The only I hope you're right, it's a black swan event and not a gray rhino event, because the gray rhino appears more often than a black swan. So I'm hoping it is a black swan event, and possibly in our lifetimes it's the only time we are seeing it. But you're right that the behavior of how we consume certain products and services, how we conduct our lives has changed, and that is creating a permanent growth, if I may use that term, in the digital economy. Let me bring in Saurabh Banerjee. Saurabh, again, you've been part of media companies, grown them, then you were part of a fund, and now you started your own. You actually in COVID, you started your own company, MyTake, and it's a media tech company. So give us a sense that you clearly believe in the digital economy. You're putting your money where your mouth is. So give us a sense of where do you see your own sector going, and what are the learnings for entrepreneurs and investors for this?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Anurag, for this wonderful gathering here. I was hearing very intensely what Anil and you and Rohit and Ashutosh were saying, and I think one of the things that Anil said was bringing the buyers and the end suppliers together. And I think digital is a great enabler, more ways than one. I mean, let's look at the data. India today consumes 12 GB per person per month, right? Global average is around 9 billion. And this number is going to go up to some 25 GB per person per month. So the buyers and the sellers have really got together. And if you look at the sort of digital economy today, I mean, content is just one part of it. But I would like to divide it into three parts. First is, the ITS services, right? And where the world has shrunk and a lot of outsourcing opportunities have come in. So an industry which is the ITS, which is roughly $200 billion, is now slated to become some $400 billion in the next 3 to 4 years. That's a huge, almost doubling, because so much of work is now going to get outsourced. Rohit was talking about startup economy and rural. So we know that because of COVID, whether it's cashless transaction or whether it is doorstep delivery, now that is expanding. I mean, investors are investing in this sector, and I'm hoping the next 2-3 years we're looking at $100 billion or so getting invested. So this startup, whether it's e-commerce or all the innovation that is happening in this sector, is probably going to lead it to a $350 billion kind of a figure. And again, the investment by some of the big IT companies, whether it's Google or whether it is Microsoft, Facebook, they're investing heavily in India in terms of infrastructure, technology. So that is also going to create more jobs and lead to expansion. So, 2 years back, I think Nirmala Sitharaman talked about, taking India to a $5 trillion by 2025, and 1 trillion was on the digital economy. So I don't know about the other sectors, but digital is definitely going to lead us there. Now, talking about our own sector, talking about MyTake, while all this is happening, there is an important element that the world is realizing, that is of sustainability, that is of environment, right? So we all have to be alive, to be able to do anything. And I think that is where I am focusing on in MyTake. So it's like for us, the purpose is that, make goodness a way of life. Today, corporates. They just are not selling their wares. They want to stand for something. The youth, look at what happened with Reddit, that GameStop thing. Look at Black Lives Matter. The youth, they want to have a seat at the table. They want to take decisions. So we are creating tools which enable all this to happen. For corporates, we're working, with a Big Four to get a ratings done, which is also based on perception, not the work done. And for the youth, I think time has come for India to have a platform where the youth go and make themselves heard and make a difference. So so that's what we are trying to do at MyTake. Yeah.
Thank you, Saurabh, for bringing that social angle, because at the end of the day, businesses cannot be separated from what's happening in the environment, from our consciousness. Business in some way provides solutions for the problems human beings and humanity has, or make the experiences better, or make things efficient. So clearly what happens in our life, in the society matters. And again, one of the things, and I say it on a serious note, that happened in COVID, and I would say it is good. I mean, I don't like COVID. I'm very mindful of the lives that have been impacted in COVID across the world and the livelihood. But in some way, COVID also led to the downfall of Donald Trump, because people saw firsthand the kind of inept handling that he did, and he in some way played down the COVID threat, which eventually cost a lot of lives in the US. I mean, it may have happened without COVID, but clearly COVID did contribute to Donald Trump going, and I think that's a good thing. And of course, Black Lives Matter, sustainability focus. I think we now know. Yesterday, I did a conversation with Dr. Christina. She's the main mover on the COP summit. She's based in Paris, and she was advisor to Lionel Jospin, the earlier French president. She's the main mover on the climate agreement, and clearly we now know what happens in one part of the world impacts us. And sometimes I feel it's a very arrogant statement that we will save Mother Earth. See, Mother Earth is capable of saving itself. For many centuries it has done. We have to save ourselves. So I think as human beings, sometimes we're very arrogant and say, oh, we will save Mother Earth. Who are we to save Mother Earth? We are getting nurtured by Mother Earth. But let me now go to Karthik.
Beautiful point.
Let me now go. Thank you, Rohit. Let me go to Karthik Radia. Karthik, again, the digital economy is creating an economy that, from a financial standpoint, is inclusion oriented. There are new fintech startups which were already either in infancy or at some stage of progress, whether it's in the personal investing space, whether it's in the loan disbursement space, whether it's in the early salary space, whether it's in micro payments. The fintech revolution over the last 10 months have also aided the overall digital economy. Because if we have to pay digitally for the goods and services that we consume, then the fintech system has to be robust. So give us a sense of what's happening in the fintech economy, and what is your take on the growth of the digital economy and the opportunities it is providing?
Sure. So first, coming to fintech, you're very right, Anurag, that fintech is one of those sectors which has taken a very different kind of a paradigm shift over last particularly 10 months. Immediately post COVID, within the period of 3 to 4 months, we see a lot of fintech companies suddenly becoming a good amount of focus. I think what we clearly see is that there are two parts or the two sides within the financial ecosystem or the economy. One is there is a side of legacy offerings or the legacy players, and on the other side we have a lot of agility players. So particularly when it comes to
I like legacy and agility. You're saying sometimes legacy does not necessarily showcase agility, and that may as well be true, but I like the way you categorize them.
Sure. And what we see is that, and it's a matter of life cycle. Everyone who has started at some point, become successful, had shown agility at some point. After you grow big, after you reach a particular scale, there is an element where you may or may not necessarily be agile and have that in mindset. And it's about listening what the end customer actually needs in your marketplace. So clearly seeing that space as fintech, for example, whether you talk about the loan space, the various other fintech offering space, we see a lot of these players overcoming the barriers, seeing a value proposition. For example, let's say edutech loans is one such very important examples, and we are seeing a lot of action happening there.
And the jury has selected one such player in the 40 under 40 also.
Absolutely, but that is again a very very unique issue. And if you see the value proposition offered by some of these fintechs solving the real problem, helping the let's say for example an education by way of offering certain loans, or maybe even for some other purposes, and seeing that as a proposition, seeing that as a less credit issue or a non-performing asset issue, which maybe some of the banks, the legacy banks, have not been able to see some of these opportunities. I think that is something which is phenomenal. Even for example, when you take education, the area of placement, which has been a very typical issue in a traditional or a legacy education service provider, and we're seeing a lot of action again happening where there are players which are coming up and giving assurances on placements, for example. So by and large, when we talk about fintech, I think there's a lot of action that we're seeing, particularly a lot of investments happening there, people realizing that fintech is going to help us solve some specific unique smaller issues that they will basically solve. Now coming to the digital part of things, certainly COVID has taken us to a very different next curve from the digital standpoint. I would particularly see for India, our country, where we already had our own Indian Silicon Valley, in the form of Bangalore, where we do a lot of action, and the largest amount of.
I have a disagreement with you. Silicon Valley stands for innovation. It stands for disruption on a scale.
So you will see that
Bangalore has produced a lot of startups, but I call it sorry, but I have to put it like that. I call it the back end of the world. I call it the sweatshop of the world. We played on cost arbitrage. For the first time in the last 2-3 years, we have actually product startups, or whether it's in the advertising tech space. Look at what InMobi is doing. I mean, they are now going to the US market. So yes, we are getting there, but I wouldn't call it the Silicon Valley.
It's a fair point, Anurag, but at the end of the day, it's about value addition. And today, if you see most of the part of the world, even it is about, let's say, services, okay, even if it is not about product and it's about services, I think I would look at from a point of view of value addition. And I think there's a huge value addition and dependence. And you see, while you see the most of the stocks and market capitalization of the IT companies growing up, I think a very important part is the dependability of these companies, which I would see, as a very important. And the world has seen the part that India can play, not only in the IT and BPO services that we did earlier, but also now in the healthcare space. So I think overall for India, it's a very good time ahead coming in front of us. Anurag.
Thank you so much, Karthik. Now, for the benefit, this conversation will be in the magazine. It will be on the YouTube channel, and we are doing this to contextualize our awards in the evening, and we have some of the exciting startups that you saw as a jury member and selected, participating in the discussion and are there at the awards. I want to know, when you look at the entrepreneurs today, vis-a-vis, let's say 10, 11 months back, what are the changes you notice? I'll start with you, Karthik, and go backwards this time.
So very, very big thing that we are seeing here. Again, I'll come back to my point on agility. I think because COVID is so very fresh in front of us, the agility in action and disruption in the mindset, I think these are the two top changes, that we are seeing. I mean, take an example of our own industry, Anurag. We have been professional services. Originally, we have been legacy thinkers, in all our offerings and services. But today, I think, having a challenger's mindset, I think that's the most important change that we are seeing in the minds of entrepreneurs. And I think the eye of value addition has become, so much open in the sense that, the entrepreneurs are now very, very vigilant, very, very open about seeing, the smaller sets of opportunities. I think the pace of conversion of those opportunities into action and ventures, I think that is, something that is what we're seeing in the as a big change in the entrepreneurs. Anurag.
Okay, I would add, Karthik, one is agility. Once you see the benefits of anything, then you tend to kind of stay with them. So we've seen that the environment is such that we are capable of making faster decisions, on a shorter decision-making timelines. And also we've seen that the opportunities in the environment is such that we need to make those decisions. And possibly that
You don't have an option now. You just don't have an option now.
Saurabh, you clearly believe in it. You've, in the last few months, built your own company, launched your own company, and also built adjunct companies around it. So give us a sense of what is the change in the mindset of entrepreneurs you see when they talk of the digital economy?
Well, I think what has happened post-COVID, there's been a lot of creation of communities and over the internet. So whichever industry you are, right? Whichever, doesn't matter. Whether it is ed tech, whether it is media, health. So these communities are getting stronger and stronger by the day, and entrepreneurs are looking at leveraging this in every possible way, right? Whether it's growing these communities, whether it is monetizing these communities, providing some kind of a benefit, or solving some kind of a problem. So user experience and customer experience, I think, has become the key for these communities to grow, and user generated content is also becoming very, very important. So all this is getting leveraged across all industries, and entrepreneurs clearly see this as an advantage. And the other thing is that remote work is more than a trend now. So which again is a very, very good tool in the hands of the entrepreneur, because now your outreach in terms of talent is across all geographies, is across all time zones. So they are using these tools, and they are using digital as an enabler. I would say, for whatever it is worth, digital is just an enabler. And they are now looking at enabling this, and that thing that Anil said, getting the buyer and the end supplier closer to each other and solving problems.
Saurabh, I may just add to it. Online gaming in the last 10 months has got a traction that would have normally taken 3 to 5 years. That's what the founders have said in terms of the numbers they've achieved. One of the top online gaming companies as we speak is filing for an IPO, Nazara Technologies. It has amalgamated many gaming startups. Look at what is happening to the fantasy space. Look at the fantasy money space. Look at the rise of Dream 11. Of course, there are regulatory challenges because the policymakers also need to be more mindful of the context changing, the environment changing. So the policy needs to be safeguarding all the stakeholders, but at the same time keeping pace. Look at EduTech. I mentioned the numbers. If you talk to any content company, they today want to be an EduTech company because they believe that everybody wants to upgrade themselves, upskill themselves, have a second income choice, have become part of the gig economy, do more gigs. So whether you look at gaming, look at EduTech, look at food delivery, because we are spending more time in our homes, we are ordering more food. Look at Kirana tech or retail tech, the last mile connectivity for Kirana. Those sectors have suddenly got so much traction, and there are startups around tech. GovTech, startups that are working with government in terms of either digitizing land records or working in terms of looking at the healthcare data and giving advice to government. This sector has seen lots of traction. So there are sectors that have emerged that were on the fringes, if I may say, because of the COVID push. But as Ashutosh said, that they might continue to see traction and become part of our life beyond COVID. So let me now bring in Mr. Garg into the conversation. Ashutosh, give us a sense of, when you talk to entrepreneurs, what has changed in the way they operate?
As you were talking, I was thinking that I'm probably the oldest member on this panel. When I was growing up and I started working 40 years ago, I used to hear this constant comment, the world is your oyster. And the first time I remember I ever traveled outside India was when I was 22 years old, when I was sent by ITC to BAT. I think what has happened today is that we have truly become a connected world. You spoke of Trump and there were barriers, etc., but nobody can create barriers for technology. And I think that connection is here to stay forever. I think entrepreneurs have started thinking out of the box. In my own little new startup, my young colleagues have actually now taken an intern from Poland. Because they say, let's get a different perspective from Europe onto the brand called you. Work from home, as we spoke, has become a reality and people are accepting it. My entire team of very small of 10 people is in 6 different cities of India. And we work absolutely seamlessly without a problem. So, it has brought in a lot more transparency. It has brought in a lot more, ability to think out of the box completely. So I do believe that entrepreneurs are taking advantage, and Indian entrepreneurs have the ability to really think out of the box. I dislike the word jugaad, but I've got to use this term here because Indian entrepreneurs have figured out how to use all this technology, not just in urban India, but I mean when I look at rural India, I'm amazed to see the amount of technology that is being used there. So I think it's a complete game changer.
Fantastic. I also don't like the word jugaad, though I use another term for it called frugal innovation. Because jugaad seems like a patchwork, whereas frugal innovation sounds good. And that's what, Mr. Bayana studied in London. He went to the London Business School. You can learn terms like that when you go to Ivy League schools. But you're right, Indian entrepreneurs are the first time thinking of world as their market. And, you beautifully, espoused this term that the world is your oyster. I think for the first time, whether because of the opportunity, let's take the media tech space, because of the Chinese apps being banned, you've seen at least 5 large businesses in the app space getting created. It may be early days for them and how they may do, but because of that, suddenly Atmanirbhar has become a reality. It's not just a slogan. And I think it has raised the consciousness and the ambition of Indian entrepreneurs. So clearly you're right that Indian entrepreneurs have started to think of a lot of new ways of doing business. You talk from work from home. I call it work from anywhere. You can work from anywhere, including the home or the office. But you can work from a cafe, you can work from a hotel, you can work from a beach, as Mr. Banerjee does a lot of times, but you can work from anywhere. These are trends that will stay. I'll tell you, today we have this conference. On Monday, I was thinking, shall we do it physically? Because I'm old world and I like to meet people and I show up in a physical way. But there are advantages of doing a digital version of a physical conference, a virtual conference. And while from 1st March, we are going back, hopefully, to all our physical conferences. But, it seems like, this is so comfortable. Correct. This is so convenient. That means you have to, travel to another city, and for example, today's winners are from 7 cities. I was looking at them, but all 40 of them is there. Normally we get 38, 39. We'll have 1 or 2 who are not able to make it physically. Today we have all the 40. So just that, because it enables you, and while the boundaries have been broken in terms of what is personal, what is office, what is school, we become boundaryless. Our hours have got extended. But I think we are more efficient. At least in my case, I feel I'm more efficient. And I'm a very face-to-face, meet me kind of a person. I remember when I first got in, I insisted that I want to meet you. And, same for Saurav and same for Karthik. I met Mr. Ahuja about 10 years back. He may not remember it, but once I met him at a Nimbus event in Bombay or a Nimbus party, I can't remember. So I'm a very face-to-face person, but while we value, another theory I have is the more digital grows, the more virtual grows, more the value of face-to-face. So if it's a very big conference and, it is differentiated and we want to do it physically, then it has to be special. I'm not saying today is not special, looking at the quality, but I think we're still in last week of Jan, we still want to be cautious, so we're not doing. So clearly the ways of being in COVID may stay beyond COVID. That's a very big point you made. And the world is our marketplace, the world is our oyster, is another very big point you made. Let me bring you in, Rohit. Rohit, now one of your startups is in the hostel, space, where the core job of an educational institution is not to run hostels. It is to provide education and placements, If I'm simplifying it. Running a hostel is not part of the core job of education. And you have a company that originated in Australia, you invested in it, and it's going global. Now, clearly, the number of students in hostels over the last 10 months were low. But suddenly, as COVID gets under control, as a vaccine comes, that business may see an uptake like never before. So clearly, new kind of businesses that solve problems that we never identified. I mean, I've lived in a hostel in engineering. I've lived in a hostel in a business school. But those were both administered by the institutions, by the college. So give us a sense of some other new age businesses or businesses that we never imagined were to be businesses, but you've seen them, whether you've invested them or about to invest in them is another issue. But give us a sense of other businesses that have got created in the last 15 months of this digital economy.
Yeah. So Anurag, but just taking that student housing business just as an example, a big part of the growth came during COVID, and it is surprising that with no student signups, relentlessly what happened is supply side was infinite for us, and that kind of goes back again to the COVID era opportunities, and that's presenting itself everywhere. So pretty much during March, April, May, when we were just a UK and an Australia company, we took a decision to enter the US, and the US was taking chances with the lockdown on and off as we all know. But what eventually ended up happening is 1.1 million inventory of rooms came to our door, which would have never come to our door. And now, when the world is kind of going back and demand is coming back with students signing up for the next semesters and so on and so forth, we are practically sitting on the biggest inventory that ever we could have created. Perhaps we wouldn't have taken that in 3 or 4 years. That kind of takes me back to the point. I think, Anurag, you said, what is it that we are seeing in the entrepreneurs, and therefore what new areas are we seeing? The biggest thing we're seeing is, we keep talking about digital. Digital it's been there. Let's also face it, and I'm kind of taking the steam out of digital for a bit. What's changing is actually what's digital doing also is it's increasing the speed of launching new businesses, which is actually very dangerous, because what's happening is it's very easy to stand up on a shallow ground some very, very good to look business models and take it to market and end up making a plethora of mistakes because velocity is so high. I think what we are seeing in entrepreneurs or new spaces that are coming up, which are very interesting, is those entrepreneurs which more than digital are going into data, which is saying, oh, hold on, digital is just increasing the amount of data I'm collecting by insane amount. पहले भी digital थे, अब भी digital हैं, but because now the business is more and more shifting on digital, I'm collecting so much more data that the inferences, the insight, the market hedges I can take, the market positions I can build, the differences I can create with my competitors who are the legacy competitors, so to speak, are much more than before. So that's a big thing we're seeing. It's not digital, it's data. The other thing we are seeing is it's not just digital. It is digital plus physical, it's blending in. And that's where amazing new business models and amazing new entrepreneurs are coming, who are actually aware that what is digital doing? It's only changing the experience and the consumption pattern. It's end of the day, you still need grocery coming through the door. End of the day, you still need a pharmacy landing in. End of the day, you still need to buy food. You still need to travel somewhere. If at all you're traveling, you still need to buy diesel, so on and so forth.
You need to buy clothes.
You need to buy clothes. So people who are blending the physical and the digital from a standpoint of what will the brand stand for? Will it inspire physical digital blending? How will consumer experience come? Will that kind of take care of physical and digital? That is very important. And that is where some entrepreneurs end up standing out tremendously. You'll see people who say, oh, it's digital, the world has changed, yesterday something happened and today is different. You know what, it isn't different. Let's also get that. It is a very heightened clarity that the blend of physical and digital is changing, but it's very nuanced. And the entrepreneurs who are getting that and getting the data equation actually are the ones we are really, really excited about.
Fantastic. Mr. Ahuja, you've been investing for almost 20 plus years, actively investing. When you now invest in 2021, what are some of the things you're telling yourself that you didn't say to yourself? Or what are the things you're observing that you never saw? So how has it changed the way you approach investments? I know you're actively part of an edutech startup, 88 Tuitions, and it has also seen increased traction. Give us a sense of how is the investing landscape changed? How are you looking at it? Is scale more important than ever? Is differentiation more important than ever? Is using only digital to reach out to consumers more important than ever? Is businesses being sustainable more important? Earlier, say in 2019, most investors and entrepreneurs were chasing valuations, and valuations are important, but they can be vanity, as we know. It can disappear very fast. But have businesses become more profit oriented, sustainability oriented, build the basics oriented, bring down the cost of acquisition? As Rohit said, look at the data and make your businesses more efficient. Give us a sense of very big seismic changes that are happening.
So let me try and answer. Let's look at the seismic changes that have taken place, and I will go back 3 decades, because I started investing in the early to mid 90s actually, and I was an integral part of the US investing landscape before the dot-com crash. So I've seen some stuff which is when Amazon was at $8, and it is whatever 3,000 something now. So we've seen some of this wonderful stuff. So if you go back to the late 90s, innovation truly was only happening in one Silicon Valley, which was the Silicon Valley in the US of A. Everything that was happening in the Indian investing scene at that time was either a supply or a service provider to that system, or it was a copycat which was saying, this model has worked in the US, let me do it here. And I think that has changed dramatically. And I think that is a transition or a transformation which represents the maturity of the Indian ecosystem. So today you have companies that are being built without a thought of what is happening in the West. These are companies which are targeted at the Indian market, at the Indian consumer. There is enough people in the Indian system who can support it. There are people in the Indian system who can fund it. The technology exists, the product can be created, the entire ecosystem. And that ecosystem has taken 20 years to build, because these are people who have worked at, they may have worked at some of the large global tech companies and come out of there. They may have learned or cut their teeth at a bank or something. The ecosystem has evolved completely. The other thing that is, I think, extremely interesting to me is the greater good that this digital transformation is going to do or not do. Because it is digital, it actually needs only, like you said, in a physical world, if I wanted to be entertained, I had to watch a play, and I would go and sit in a room with 30 or 40 people. Somebody would own the theater, somebody would produce the product, somebody would do the lighting, blah, 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 blah. In today's digital world, it's become a winner take all. So you need 10 shows or 20 shows worldwide, which will dominate 80 to 90% of the dollar revenues associated with them. And it makes no difference, whether the consumer is in China or in India, and they are still watching Game of Thrones and they're still watching, House of Cards. So the concentration of power and the concentration of revenue and the concentration of, should I say, the benefits of digital connectivity and the whole digital world lands up in the hands of very few people. So there is going to be a large number of people who will actually be deprived of the benefits or the economic and social benefits of this entire chain, which comes to the pure social thing, which Saurav also touched upon. How are some of these companies doing good? And I think that is becoming a question, because it is easy to disrupt sectors. It is easy to, if there were 3 layers of intermediaries in the middle, you can take them all out and you can disrupt the sector. But the reality is, you have to ask yourself a question: is this doing good? Whether it is a job focus or an interview focus or an admission focus, when are we going to actually start talking about a knowledge focus? I don't see any company turning around and saying, come to me, I will actually help you understand something better. The whole thing is, how will I get you into a particular college or a particular industry? So I think there is a good and a bad, and I think there is a balance which is very interesting. But the Indian entrepreneur has matured. The Indian entrepreneur is taking on the world, and we have seen that across multiple companies which are actually going from India and going into the Western world and taking the product set with them. This is not people taking a service set, they're taking a product set into the Western world.
Absolutely. I want to bring to this, again, businesses are beyond marketing. Customer acquisition marketing is a large part of some of the B2C business. But one of the terms that has become center stage in the last 10 months is D2C, direct to consumer or digital to consumer, because in this digital acceleration in digital economy, as Rohit said, as you said, it's about balance. Manufacturing still needs to happen. Somebody has to stitch the clothes. Somebody has to, plant the vegetables. There are physical things that will stay physical. The delivery mechanism may have become digital, but a lot of brands, as you saw in the presentations by some entrepreneurs, whether these are specialized grooming products, as you saw, someone had a natural, chemical-free grooming products. They've all grown because they've become D2C. The word D2C has seen more usage, direct to consumer or digital to consumer. Do you think in the next few years, while I personally believe that media is 360 degree, it's not either or. While we spend a lot of time on our WhatsApp, average time executives spend on their phones is 6 hours, looking at their screens. People like me spend about 8.5 hours every day looking at my phone screen, between this screen and the phone. So with us spending a lot more time on the screens, we all are screenagers. We may not be teenagers, but we are screenagers. So do you see this D2C trend accelerating? Or do you see, when it comes to media consumption, we're talking of a 360 degree, newspapers have their role, television has their role, and digital, whether it's social media or other digital platforms, have their role. So give us a sense of what do you think? Of course, Saurav thinks it'll be digital. That's why he started my take. But let me ask Karthik, Mr. Garg, Rohit, and then I'll come to Saurav in the end. Karthik, do you think D2C will be the way most of the businesses will exist, or do you think other media has a chance to exist?
So I think it'll be a combination of things. So there are already good set of IPs and contents which are there. They will definitely exist. But I think very important point is the newer age media and like, let's say, take an example of Netflix, for example. To quite an extent, the amount of time that people have limited, for example, to a large extent, you see people using that on a device, and maybe that is, of course, decreasing a consumption of a television. Television is not going to go away, at least in the short to medium term. But you will see definitely a good amount of consumption that is going to happen through the digital channels, and therefore D2C is also going to occupy a very, very important space in the entire set of offerings. Even through the panels that we have set, Anurag, one very important thing that we have seen is, even for the traditional companies, when they say direct to consumer, the online space, for example, they keep saying about the online space, the online sales in all the companies that we have seen, today the companies cannot exist without an online sale. So if you said you have only got a traditional format to deliver things, that's not going to work. But at the same time, it is not that you will go overnight into a completely new format and the old format goes away completely. I think it will be a mix of things that will happen, and certainly the D2C will occupy a very, very prominent position, and the traditional companies also will have to have a D2C model embedded, very much embedded as a part of their offering.
Okay, Mr. Garg, your point of view on D2C is here to become mainstream, or it will be an adjunct part of the overall way a business operates?
Thank you, Anurag. I think what is going to decide what each of these channels will, what will be their survival strategy will be dependent on the demographic profile that we are looking at. Your the millennials and the Gen Zs are almost entirely moving to a digital platform. It's very, very difficult to find someone who's actually picking up a newspaper or picking up a magazine to read. But people who are older, they are looking at much more television. They are looking at, reading the physical newspaper or the magazine much more. And then the other divide is how deep is the penetration of our digital into rural India, and what is the impact going to be in rural India, and how soon will that transition happen? But I think the trend is very clear that the digital to consumer is something which will move very, very rapidly. In a country the size of India, it may take longer, but the direction is very clear. It is moving in that direction.
The only point I want to make is that a lot of people who are even not millennials, who are 60, 70, 75, have for the first time, I don't have a number, but it's like 1 million, 2 million people who for the first time did e-commerce, first time order grocery. So they are not millennials in the way we define, but they have seen the advantages and experimented, or at least started using digital as a delivery. So they've also got added. And can I tell you, my daughter who's 17 and she does a YouTube channel, she got featured in a magazine. And while I sent her the digital copy, she says, Papa, where is the printed copy? And while I gifted her Kindle at 10, she's 17 now, she buys at least 2 to 3 books a week. So, I think in our mind, we have these.
Absolutely.
And of course, there's no question that we all have become more digital. Millennials are spending a lot of time on social media. The statistics bear us out, but it's not either or. Clearly, we have. Quick comment from you, Rohit.
So Anurag, I completely agree with you. Actually, I would differentiate digital and D2C. Digital is here to stay. It's for everyone. I think you made that great example about your daughter. I'll talk about my pay. We are very deep in senior care and aging as a business. I always think that seniors were the last bastion of consuming data. I think even they are very soon going to start consuming data insanely well. So digital is here. D2C, I have a very strong view. I think D2C, again, being tempered and balanced, it's not going to be all D2C. If anything, actually, we're going to see channels and affiliate marketing and affiliate management really become very dominant, because the more companies start becoming digital, they also start kind of becoming specialists and affiliates market. When specialists need to get consumed, you will definitely need better channel management. What better example than to see Netflix getting beamed on Amazon Prime, right? Amazon Prime, you go on, you will still see a Hotstar and still see a Netflix. So I think channel management will be very, very key.
Okay. Saurav, your point of view before I bring in Mr. Ahuja.
Yeah, very quickly, while I understand the D2C is a new opportunity, and before that, there were traditional ways of reaching out, whether it's television, movie, radio, and through that physically you would sell, and that barrier is broken. I think what is different right now is 2 things. That today 60% of India is young and digitally connected, and you're also talking about screenager, which goes beyond just young people. What is different now is the interactivity, the perception, because now people can talk back to the brands. Earlier you could not. The brands would talk to you through traditional channels. Now you can talk back, and perception, how I gave that Reddit example of that GameStop, and that's a huge power. So brands now need to be responsible, and D2C is just another channel, I would say. But what is most important is how do you use the might of digital to communicate both ways and communicate goodness, and ensure that it's just not the power of brands and money to make it big, but do things where you profit for goodness, and for God's sake, you can. We've seen investors investing in companies which have high ratings on ESG or whatever. You will earn more revenues because customers will buy your products if you are a good company, right? You will get talent because they will want to be associated with a good company. Your costs will go down if you work in a sustainable manner. So I think these are some of the basic pillars, and D2C is just another medium. That's my take.
Yeah, it's another. Even if you look at the Diwali sales of more than retailers, while digital contributed, but the walk-ins in stores were significant part of the sales. So while we talk of the omni-channel with digital as part of it, it was a lot of physical retail contributing to the growth of those brands. Mr. Ahuja, your final word before I get the final comment.
I would actually question the question because I genuinely believe that it has to do with the product at hand and a true understanding of what the product is at hand. To take a few examples, I would question every intermediary layer, and if an intermediary layer is not required, the company should not own it. It may rent it for a while, but it should not own it. So do not make it a permanent feature, because it is like if you're a bank, starting a bank today, don't build 100,000 branches because you won't need them. Like you take your Diwali example, I would say that this is not about the visit to the store was not to buy the crackers or the sweets. The visit to the store was serving a different need, which was to dress up, to go out, to do something else. So if we clearly understand what is the product which is being sold, or what is the product that is being consumed, and what is the product that we are producing, please do not invest in and please do not own any of the intermediate layers. Rent them, use them, do whatever, but do not own them and do not get committed to them, because that flexibility is what will help you in the long run.
Thank you, Mr. Ahuja. You're right. One of the things I've learned to know is looking at the exciting people we saw, and that, we know very little. And I think one of my learnings from COVID is that, we know that we know a lot. We know we don't know a lot, but we don't know there's a lot more that we don't know. So there are a lot more unknowns, as I call them. I think that's my learning. And clearly, people are doing stuff that was unimaginable. Entrepreneurs solving problems. I would like to wrap the panel by asking you one prediction for the future. Short, crisp, one prediction for the digital economy. Karthik Radia, you first.
IoT will be a game changer in the digital world. IoT is the next big thing. IoT along with 5G.
IoT along with 5G, both from an industrial commerce standpoint and from an industrial, usage or digital standpoint. I know an investor who runs a large fund who's just given almost $1 billion to one of the largest auto companies in the world to build, if I may, industrial IoT based on blockchain. They've invested in a new technology. So clearly, what you say is already happening. So it may get accelerated. Mr. Garg, your one.
I would say 5G will be a big reality, and second is going to be privacy and cybersecurity. I think these are very, very critical things for us in a digital world.
Okay, thank you. Saurav, your final take, my take. Saurav, you'll have to unmute yourself. As the finance minister unmutes the economy on Monday, before that you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I mean, pharma, EVs, and retail. I think these are the three sectors I would see a lot of.
Okay. Clearly, healthcare as a sector, and I'm including pharma, will grow. You're right. EVs. I think the need for personal mobility will ensure that a lot of millennials buy, their own personal mobility solutions. And clearly the move towards sustainability and the consciousness that young people have towards fossil fuels and environment will make that, and the incentives provided, the savings will make that happen. Rohit, your one prediction.
You stole one from me. Healthcare, I really think will go through a lot of innovation. So as a sector, that is the one. As a technology, Anurag, I would say immersive experience, technologies which are enabling immersive experience for users to really get a real feel. We'll see some amazing investments, innovation, disruption, all that happen.
Okay. I must do a disclosure that Rohit and me were classmates, and he was the topper of the class. And he stole, I used to be number one in chemistry, that my father is a chemistry professor. And I remember one time in class 9, he got 3 marks more than me, and that week was very tough for me at home, but at least I stole something from you, Rohit. I meet Rohit every year at the first week of the year to get ideas. I remember Rohit talking to me about, we met at Maurya for lunch, and you told me 3 years about, what will happen in the healthcare business in terms of, remote operations. You talked to me about Li-Fi 3 years back, and the scale. So clearly, because of the vantage point of investing that you have, you see these trends. Mr. Ahuja, final word from you.
I think most of it has been covered, but I'm a big believer right now in longevity, and I think the kind of innovation and data that will be used for at the DNA gene level, etc. I think that's where excitement is going to come, and how people are acting. Yeah.
3 years back, there was a more 4, maybe 5, that by 2030, it said, the Time magazine article said that by 2030, we'll have technologies that will help us live till 100. I mean, if we don't get hit by a bus or whatever, and I think that reality is closer than we think. My own personal take is blockchain will revolutionize the way every business happens. And payments is one part, so cryptocurrency is one part. But I think blockchain usage will only grow. That's my view. I think I forgot to ask Mr. Garg's view. Mr. Garg, your final view.
No, I did say, but you're absolutely right. I think cryptocurrencies will be there, but the blockchain is the true game changer. I mean, cryptocurrencies are a subset of really blockchain, because the only area that blockchain is going to create problems is when people don't want transparency, and I think that has to be removed in our world, in a digital world, in any case.
Thank you so much for contributing to this discussion. Grateful for your time, your insights, and hopefully we'll be able to build on them. Back to you, Khyati. It's a whole day conference till 6:20, and 6:30 we start our awards. You've been jury members, so it'd be nice if you can join and meet these exciting startups and kind of congratulate them. So back to you, Khyati, and thank you to Mr. Ahuja, Mr. Adia, Mr. Banerjee, Mr. Byana, and Mr. Garg. Thank you so much.